Believe it or not, despite being chronically online enough to have a YouTube channel, I do have friends. I really pride myself on giving my friends really great book recommendations. When I recommend books, I typically base my recommendations off of the vibe that they're looking for. With so many books in the world, 3 things at least are true. 1, my physical TBR watches me sleep at night. 2, as I previously said, the vibes of the book are very, very important to me. And 3, a rave review of a book from a friend is incredibly motivating for me to pick it up because the hobby that I love maybe even more than reading books is talking about books. So keeping these 3 things in mind, today we have the most fun video I have ever made and the first collaboration I've ever done on this channel. Stay tuned for a surprise at the end. I sent my friend Marisa from Margins of Marisa a mood board and a photo of my physical TBR. And her task was to review my physical TBR, review my mood board, and choose some books that represent my mood board from my physical TBR. If you're curious about Marisa's mood board, her physical TBR, and my recommendations based off of them, head over to her channel to see me go through her physical TBR and recommend her books, and then to get her thoughts on the books that I recommended. Without further ado, let's turn it over to Marisa.
Hi, I'm Marisa from Margins of Marisa. Thank you so much to Emily for letting me be on her channel today and give some recommendations. So Emily sent me this mood board in order for me to curate some recommendations that fit the overall vibe presented here. Looking at her mood board, the first thing I get an impression of is overall just the female gaze. It feels very driven by girlhood or girly things. There's a sense of magic and whimsy that is felt throughout all of the images. And within a lot of the images, there's sort of a dream-like quality. We also have this quote that says, "You are about to enter someone else's dream," which I think is very interesting and something I'll definitely want to play with. So let's go ahead and look at Emily's physical TBR to see what we can connect. Overall, she has a large variety of genres, authors, just selections, which is super fun for me to pick from. From her stacks, I have read 7 of the books on her physical TBR. That would be The Girls, The Seas, The Goldfinch, Brave New World, Shadow and Bone, and Then There Were None, and I'm currently in the middle of The Handmaid's Tale, so I'm gonna count that. Jumping into our first pick, there was one book that immediately stood out as feeling very similar to the mood board Emily gave me, and that would be The Girls by Emma Cline.
Okay, this is actually such an interesting coincidence because I just started recording a video of me reading the highest rated book on my shelf and the lowest rated book on my shelf, and The Girls is actually the lowest rated book on my shelf. So I'm 30% through with The Girls currently. I don't think Marisa knows. I just started it last night and she recorded this last night. So as she was recording this video, picking The Girls for me, I was starting The Girls. What a coincidence. I'm really enjoying it. If it's out, I will link the video in the description. If it's not out, then just subscribe and keep your eye out for it.
I think the female gaze is very present in The Girls, as is it in Emily's mood board. If you're not familiar, The Girls follows a young girl who I think is 14 over one whole summer in the 1960s as she befriends this group of women who she later finds out are a part of a cult. The other half of the story is told from that same girl later in her life as she's reflecting back on that summer, which I think gives it an overall hazy, dreamlike quality, which again, fits with Emily's mood board. Now I will say, your mood board gives me just a very positive feeling, and I don't feel that way about The Girls. I'm sure you've read the trigger warning since it's on your physical TBR, but just in case you haven't, this book is about a cult, so there are very dark themes. The main relationship is between an adult and a minor, which is just very uncomfortable and unsettling to read. But on top of that, there's also sexual coercion and sexual abuse. So I just want you to know that before getting into it. And that's one way it doesn't fit with your mood board, but I think the other parts are enough to still connect it. But I don't get that feeling of magic from it. So that's where we'll get into the second book. Now for the second pick, I'm going to choose a book that I actually have not read myself. Yes, I've read 7 of the books on your physical TBR, but I don't feel like they capture the essence of your mood board. So instead, I'm going to recommend The Lost Apothecary. The Lost Apothecary is the story of a female apothecary who secretly dispenses poison to women in order to use it on men who have harmed them. So much like The Girls, it is just an overall female-driven story. It even says in the description that rule number 1 is that you must not use the poison on another woman. Love that. And I think there's going to be more of the magic and whimsy that I get from your mood board in this book, but I haven't read it myself, so you'll have to let me know if you pick it up. I think it also connects to the image in the mood board with the G, girls, gone wild, gore, gun, gynecology. It just feels like there's a general feminist message in both. And for the third option, I'm going to suggest a book that you do not have on your physical TBR. This is a book I have read and I really love, not to hype it up too much. That would be Yerba Buena by Nina lacour. Yerba Buena is the story of 2 women who are on very different life paths, but they eventually end up becoming intertwined as a love story. So this is a sapphic romance, which again, I think fits with the female gaze that I see in your mood board, but I wouldn't call this a romance novel. It feels almost more literary fiction, and really it is just such a beautiful story about these 2 women. And although there's no specific magic or whimsy within it, I think it still fits. It kind of feels like it could go with that picture in the top corner that is just the interconnection of books, art, love, coffee, sex. This book is just about life and the different paths that one can take and how eventually you'll get to where you need to go. And I think that's very beautiful. I also think it can connect to the piece that says you are about to enter someone else's dream, because for both women, but mainly one of them in particular, they're really fighting against the cards that have been dealt to them in life. And I think they're carving the path for their own dreams in a way that maybe they wouldn't have suspected could have ever been true for them. It's just a really great story, and if you decide to pick it up, I really hope you enjoy it. So those are my picks for you, Emily, based off your lovely, beautiful mood board. I hope I gave you something you're interested in, and I'm so excited to see what you're gonna pick up. Thanks for having me.
Okay, that was like one of the best things I've ever watched in my life. What a special little video, having someone like look at your mood board, having someone look at your physical TBR. I don't know, I've always really loved like looking at people's bookshelves. I feel like it's kind of a window to the soul. That like just was so sweet. So I'm gonna read probably all 3 of those books, because especially the third, I actually have never heard of the third book. It sounds like something that's right up my alley. Hopefully it's available in paperback, because I think that that would also be gorgeous, beautiful paperback on my shelf. And I'm so excited that I'm already reading The Girls by Emma Cline. I would not have made that connection from my mood board to The Girls, but I think that that's kind of the value of listening to people talk about books that aren't necessarily book reviews that are just like summary and here's the genres. There are certain books that evoke certain vibes. Maybe you won't always remember all the details of the plot, but you'll remember how something made you feel. And that's kind of like what a mood board is for. It's like for a feeling. Now I'm like double motivated to read The Girls by Emma Cline, which was the lowest rated book on my TBR, but I don't think it's going to be the book that I rate the lowest this year. Okay, talk soon. I have finished the books that Marisa recommended. Speaking of Marisa, hey! We have a very special guest on the channel, and it's not Piper this time. She's here too, don't worry. We have 2 special guests on the channel this time. Marisa is in Austin. We have been chatting about books and dancing and hanging out and having just the best weekend. Now we're gonna catch you up on the books that I read that Marisa recommended based off of my mood board. I think that the books that you picked really did fit the vibe. The first book that Marisa recommended to me that I read was The Girls by Emma Cline. This book had been on my shelf for so incredibly long. I actually talked a lot about it in a video that should be up soon about the reading the highest and lowest rated books on my shelf. This was actually the lowest rated book. It is a controversial one. I was really excited that you picked this because it was something that I like kept putting off, but reading the first page of it, I was like, oh, why have I been putting this off? I'm gonna really like this. And I feel like that's such a good vibe when you're on page 1 and you're like, this book is so up my alley. Why have I not started it before? This is like a culty coming of age book. We follow 2 different points of view. The girl that was in the cult is now an adult, and she's kind of looking back on her story and telling her story of when she was in a a cult when she was a young girl. This book was definitely the female gaze aspect of it, because we have this young, impressionable girl that's watching older girls and she's kind of enamored by them. It's based on the Manson cult. It is really dark, so I feel like that was maybe not as aligned with the mood board, but that kind of book is up my alley, and I feel like you know that. I rated this 5 stars. I went back and forth between 4 stars and 5 stars actually, because I feel like this book kind of ran into a similar problem that Lolita ran into, where it was marketed as almost like a Taylor Jenkins Reid-esque book, which Lolita wasn't, but that was kind of marketed as like a romance almost, which is such a problem. And this one kind of was similar. On the cover it says a seductive and arresting coming of age story, and I was really hung up on the fact that they called it seductive, because the main relationship, like you warned me, is between a minor and the cult leader. So it's like, I guess you could call it seductive, but when I see seductive on the cover, I'm like, oh, romantic. And this was very disturbing. Despite that, I still loved it so much and feel like it deserves the 5 stars, because I feel like the actual book itself talked about things well. It reminded me of Lolita, The Bell Jar, and Dark Places by Gillian Flynn, like a combination of those books. So it was like very dark. You're inside the mind of a teenager, just like you are in The Bell Jar, and I really, really liked that. And all those 3 books were also 5 stars for me. So reading this, I was like, this is all of those themes wrapped up into a cult book.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I'm so glad you liked it, because I wasn't sure, since it was for sure lacking the positive energy from your mood board, but I felt like it had that sort of hazy summer vibe that I was feeling from your pictures. And of course the female gaze, like you said, is very much present in the book, and I think it's so striking getting that from the like 14-year-old perspective, because Emma Cline writes the character really well. Like, it's a believable teenager, and it's sort of like I can remember being back in that age and looking at older girls and being sort of mystified by them. So I thought it was a good pick, and I'm so glad you gave it 5 stars. I didn't know if that would be the case, but I'm thrilled that it was.
It was amazing. I loved it so much. The next book that Marisa chose based on my mood board was The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner. This book follows 2 points of view. Present day, which is following a woman whose husband cheated on her, and she's going on this trip by herself and kind of like rediscovering herself. The other perspective that we have is from the 1800s, the people that were the original like owners and operators of the Lost Apothecary. Essentially, present day girl finds this apothecary and she starts doing research and digging into it, learns that this apothecary was for women by women, and it was for women who needed to, you know, dispose of a trash man. And the rule was that you can only use the poisons on men, so it was very female gaze. I think that the overall vibe of this book was the best fit for the mood board, because it was fantasy, you had the female gaze, you have the, I think that I had a bowl of crystals on the mood board, so it's like that kind of witchy, I guess you could say. I think also the Girls Gone Wild Gore Gun Gynecology, and I think that you called that out, and I think that that definitely fit really well. And the you are about to enter someone else's dream, because she's like kind of learning about the past during the present. I ended up rating this book 2 stars. Marisa hasn't read this one, so she didn't know that the writing style and the characters and the way that things were pulled together just kind of took a really interesting concept and ran it into the ground in a way. I did see some reviews say this concept needs to be confiscated from Sarah Penner and given to any other author. But sometimes I like books and people will be a hater, and I'm like, no, I liked that, I ate it up. This kind of just felt like Colleen Hoover level of characters, and they would do things that would kind of upset me. It was kind of like a doormat girl in the present. This one missed the mark for me in terms of the book itself, but I definitely think it fit the mood board really well, and it was a really fast read. It's not crazy long. But yeah, I like wish that, I think like, who would be a good author for this? Like, imagining if Emma Cline even wrote something like this, I think that I would have eaten this up.
Yeah.
And that it could have been a 5-star for me had it been a different author, a different writing style. So, good vibe choice, especially for not having read it.
Yeah.
It's hard to pick.
I feel bad I picked one that was such a miss, but like you said, I haven't read it, so
yeah,
I didn't know.
You're not at fault.
But I'm glad that it at least hit the vibe mark, because Looking at your mood board, I was getting that fantasy vibe, and I don't read like a ton of fantasy. Seeing like what you had in your selection, it did feel like the best choice. So that's on Sarah Penner.
Also, we did the mood board plus the physical TBR, and my physical TBR is not super extensive, so there weren't a ton of choices also, and I feel like this was like the best choice because I have a lot of books that really don't fit my mood board at all. And that kind of, it makes for a hard pick. The final book that Marisa picked and that I read was Yerba Buena by Nina lacour. Is that how you say it? Okay. This was a kind of like a slice of life sapphic romance, but the romance was pretty light, I would say. It was more about two individual people who cross paths and then kind of uncross paths and come back into each other's life. And I would describe this very much as a slice of life where we get a lot of time with these characters' families and their individual struggles, and also just a lot of like hanging out in a coffee shop kind of vibe and renovating an old house and mixing craft cocktails. Like, these characters live in LA and they have these sweet little lives and we get to just kind of live them with the characters. This didn't have the fantasy element, but it definitely had the female gaze and it definitely had that light vibe to it, even though there were things that happened to these characters that weren't light and easy life experiences. Like, they definitely went through their struggles, but the way that it was discussed was just very lovely. My very favorite part of it was when one of the girls sent the other a picture of the sink. One of them is dealing with some family things and they're not talking that much, no cell service kind of thing, and like one's freaking out a little bit, and the other girl like sends her a picture of just kind of like the sink that she's washing dishes at and the view of her house with like no other words. And the girl that receives the photo is like, I know a love letter when I see one. And I was like, it was just so sweet and lovely. It was one of those books where I was like, oh, I need to like slow down and enjoy life more. I need to just be in the moment and like not take things so like go, go, go. Like, it just kind of makes you want to slow down. So I feel like this would be the perfect book if you want a light summer read that still has substance to it and you're not like a huge romance reader, because it has just the most tasteful amount of romance that feels really realistic. Because a lot of times I'll be reading a traditional romance book and I'm like, these characters are so wrapped up in the romance and they're not like thinking about anything else in their life. It's literally just romance, which like duh, it's a romance book. But this felt so much more realistic and would be a perfect beach or vacation read. And I finished this book in my favorite restaurant, and the fact that they were always in the restaurant and like hanging out and really just sitting in the vibe and being in the moment, I was like, this is perfect. I gave this book 4 stars.
I think you said it perfectly. That's exactly why I love this one so much. As someone who claims to be a romance hater, which we know is not true, but I think this one really hits the mark for me. I would almost say it's like a literary romance. You get to enjoy such nice aspects of the relationship, but also see their lives outside of the relationship, which is something I really crave in a lot of romance books because it makes it more believable. And it's nice when you can see like a healthy, lovely relationship play out and be like, maybe this could actually happen. I'm surprised.
I feel like also romance is so character driven because it's about the romance, and this one had a lot of plot, but then it also had a lot of really good character development. And I've read some romances where I'm like, okay, I don't like the characters and there's nothing else for me because it's all about these characters and their relationship. But even if you weren't rooting for their relationship or didn't care about it, you could still fully and completely enjoy this book.
I think if you're someone who also really cares about good writing as well, and that's something that, to be honest, I think is lacking in the romance genre a lot of time because it's so formulaic and it's like, let me just say my piece. This one you can really like get into it and enjoy the quality of writing as well as the romance and the characters, which is such like a treat in a romance book. Definitely for the like literary lovers. It is light despite having such heavy topics in it, which is one of my favorite parts about it.
I feel like you don't always see that. I feel like a book will be like super heavy or just about nothing, and this was like it felt like balanced. I would say this book felt well balanced.
Yeah.
Okay, oh my god, how do we end this? How do we end your video?
So how did you like the experience of creating a mood board and getting recommendations based off that, especially in relation to your physical TBR? How'd you like it and would you do it again?
Great question. I really loved it. It was so fun watching your video of diving into the books on my physical TBR and then like looking at my mood board and analyzing it and giving me recommendations. When we read, sometimes it's like, what's the book about and who's recommended it and what's the rating, and it's not really like, this is the vibe of the book. This is just the imagery that it evokes and kind of how it makes you feel. I would definitely do it again. It was so wonderful. It made me read 2 books on my physical TBR that had been there for a while. And I have a big goal of reading all the books in my physical TBR this year. So I think that was just like such a fun way to do that. And like you said, there were connections that I didn't make. I never would have thought you would pick The Girls based on my mood board. But I'm so glad that I read it because it was a 5-star book for me. Mm-hmm. And like maybe I never would have gotten around to it. Maybe I would have donated it and just gone my whole life without reading it. So I would definitely do it again. I loved it so much.
I also loved it, and I'm so glad we did it together because it was so fun, and it ended up bringing us together to our meeting in Austin.
Our meeting in Austin, and it was the perfectly timed trip. If you haven't already watched Marisa's video, go watch it so you can see the books that I recommended her based on her mood board, because we finally got her to read a book that I've been dying to hear her thoughts on since I've met her. If you're curious of her thoughts on that book, go watch it. And that's all. Bye.